I have to say I'm surprised. Legitimately surprised. Like, almost absolutely floored that it actually happened. It makes me think that when something so obviously needs to happen, that I've got to help it go the distance and do my part to lay out that good old fashioned Jeff Jinx to ensure that it does happen. Because I just came on here the other day talking about how the Bulls keeping Jim Boylen as their head coach would be such typical epitome of Reinsdorf. It is a Reinsdorf move all the way. Be in one of the biggest markets in the country, yet pretend to continue to believe that you are a small market team. Same thing he does with the White Sox. Always feeling like you're the B plus or B or C level player, even though you have so many things in the fold that should suggest that you are A-list and should be A-list and should consistently be in the A-list conversation. Of course, at the end of the day, we know why the Chicago Bulls are not, and that is exclusively because of Jaron Reinsdorf. Now, you could sit there and you could blame Gar Forman, and you could blame John Paxson, you could blame this, and you could go back to the days of blaming Jerry Krause. And all of those things are contributing factors. But at the end of the day, where did the buck stop? The buck stops with Reinsdorf. Which is exactly why it wouldn't have been a surprise if the Bulls would have retained Jim Boylen. Because they didn't want to take the financial hit from firing the guy that clearly is in over his head and clearly already lost his players, which is a miracle how quickly he did that. That wasn't getting a team to respond. Just even when you look at the X's and O's of what he did as a coach, it was just absolutely abhorrent that you would trot that abomination, that abortion out there as an NBA level head coach. But would totally have been within the wheelhouse of Reinsdorf and totally within the realm of possibility as something that they would do. They would keep him because they didn't want to take the financial hit when they gave him the contract that they should have never given him to begin with. Should have never given him the job to begin with. But they were stubborn and they were persistent and insistent and they did it. And of course, as so often is the case with this Bulls organization over the past 2 decades, it largely failed. But they did it. He actually did it. And he actually allowed the new leadership that he put in place to actually run their show. The Chicago Bulls have relieved Jim Boylen of his head coaching duties. I mean, this is truly, to me, a stunning development. Now, on the one hand, you're so relieved at Jim Boylen being fired that you really want to celebrate. And you want this to be representative of a big cultural, dynamic, shifting change in the organization. But let's hold back just a little bit before we throw out the anointing oil on the new front office here. Because we're celebrating the firing of a guy that should have never been hired for the job to begin with. And even once it became clearly obvious that the guy was a clown, he was an idiot, had horrible interpersonal skills, lost his team, displayed terrible leadership, terrible fundamental understanding of X and O's on the basketball court as a head coach on a consistent basis, he should have already been sent packing. Should have already been sent packing. The fact that it even took into mid-August for that decision to be made is even then peak Reinsdorf. Like, he should have been gone. Goodbye, so long, sayonara, see ya, don't let the door hit you where the good Lord split you! Making the move that is so freaking obviously needed to everybody, up until a couple of days ago to the Bulls organization, is not something we should celebrate. We should be glad that they finally acknowledged it. We should be glad that they made the move. But that doesn't mean we should be celebrating it. Because that is just one part of a much bigger problem of this organization. One part of a significantly bigger problem. When you watch the Bulls over the past couple of years, like, they're a bad team. But they're not a horrible team. They're also not a good or really good team. The point being is they're kind of stuck in that perpetual cycle of NBA mediocrity, where they think they're just close enough where they can actually potentially contend for the wild card, even though they're not. Not the wild card, you get what I'm saying, the 8th seed. Even though they're not. So as a result, they sit there and do really bad, dumb, stupid things, such as trading for Otto Porter and that abortion abomination of a contract, which will hamstring the organization still, because that's what you allowed Garpax to do. Because instead of wanting to build an actual championship contender and actually win more trophies, you are content with just sitting there and putting some fans in the seats, turning a little bit of profit, making some money, and then if you get into the playoffs, great. And if not, no big deal. Bulls fans are still so caught up in the 90s, they don't really notice. And the reality is, in some ways, that sentiment is correct. But firing Jim Boylen is just one step in the right direction, of which there need to be many steps. There must be. Because this move in and of itself is not going to solve anything. Like I've seen Bulls fans the past day or two talking about on social media Mark Jackson and floating out Mark Jackson's name or Jason Kidd's name. Why in the hell would you want any part of either of those two? What in the hell makes you think that long term they would be a guy that you want to sit there and build a team, a culture, an environment around, a guy that you think can take you to the championship? Those guys have proven they're not going to do that. So why would you want to sit there and say that? I've also seen somebody threw out there a name like Kirk Heinrich. Captain Kirk, really? Maybe as an assistant, or maybe if you want to get adventurous and you want to get nuts, maybe. The reality is it can be really hard when you're looking for an NBA head coach because these guys typically don't get a lot of time. They don't get a lot of shelf life. You know, even if they're coming into really bad situations, it's always unreasonable to me that these front offices and these ownership groups expect so much out of these guys when you know going into it that, hey, the roster that's been constructed for them is god-awful. Like, there's only but so much juice you could squeeze out of this somewhat rotting orange. So, obviously, the choice of the next head coach is going to be of critical importance. And the reality is I don't know that we will even be able to say once that guy is hired whether or not that guy is going to be a good fit, whether that guy is going to be right for the job or not. And what I also worry about is Bulls fans are going to look at this new front office and this new leadership, and they're going to expect a quick turnaround, and they're going to expect this, and they're going to expect big things to happen. Big money moves in free agency, and Anthony Davis, and maybe some combination of those things could happen. Maybe. But even, let's say, for example, you went into the offseason, you were able to bring in Anthony Davis. You're still nowhere close to a championship contending team. So again, you've got to temper the expectations a little bit. Or you just sit there and you have Anthony Davis use the Bulls as leverage, as the Bulls have been used as an organization the past 2 decades in so many different ways, and then nothing happens and the guy ends up going somewhere else or they end up staying with their original team because they can make even more money. But you look at this team, like that they really need to bottom out. I'm sorry. Because all they've been doing the past few years is playing just poorly enough to stay out of the playoffs where they wouldn't be anything to take seriously anyways. And they're just good enough where they don't get into the top 3 or top 4 picks. And I promise you this, you get stuck in that perpetual mid-lottery hell of picking 7th every year, it's not going to get the job done. Like, Lauri Markkanen is an NBA player. Is he a franchise guy? No. Sorry, he's not. Is Wendell Carter a nice NBA big? Yes. Is he a guy that you build around? No. Is Kobe White shown some upside as a rookie when Boylen wasn't trying to screw with him and screw him up at every chance that he could be a long-term starting point guard in the league? Sure, absolutely. Is he a franchise guy? Don't think so. You know, what are you going to tell me next? You got big hopes for Otto Porter? Well, those dreams should have gone crashing down to earth a long time ago. There's a reason Washington couldn't wait to get rid of him. And then you look at Zach LaVine. Zach LaVine is the perfect example of nice player, very good NBA player, not a superstar, not a dude, not a franchise-level guy. He's a stat filler on a bad team, which is exactly what he's been. Does a lot for himself offensively, but doesn't make others around him better. At times can certainly be a ball vacuum and not in a positive way, and then offers you literally nothing on the defensive side of the ball. Again, not the type of dude that you'd want. Like if you were in Houston and you were pairing him on the wing Instead, let's say Eric Gordon opposite of James Harden, and Zach LaVine probably is an incredible fit there. But you've got a guy like LaVine. Are you really wanting to hitch your wagon to him? Are you really wanting to build around him? No. So the problem is when you look at this Bulls team, they don't have a ton of appealing lottery capital. Like, what are they going to end up probably picking 7th again this year? Who knows how that plays out when the lottery comes. But you're talking about a team that doesn't have a true, clear-cut young guy to build around. They don't have a franchise guy in the wings. They've got 2+ decades of bad will and bad visibility and bad perception amongst league circles. I just don't see how this thing is going to get a whole lot better that much quickly, nor do I necessarily think that should be the right call. I'm always tired of this organization, as so often the case with a lot of Chicago teams, is when they try to be bad, or they don't try to be bad, but they end up being bad, but they end up being not good enough to go in one direction, not bad enough to go in the other direction, where things can truly turn around. Or if you are the Chicago Bears, for example, when you do get the 2nd overall pick, you take the wrong damn guy at the position of most importance. Look at the Cubs. They bottomed out intentionally by design. It eventually led to a World Series trophy coming to the north side for the first time in 108 years. The White Sox now are trying to follow a similar pattern to what the Cubs had done and what the Houston Astros had done, of really bottoming out and then building it up through young talent. Like, there's a reason that formula works, because it's a sensible way to do it. And while you don't have the same level of control, you don't have the same the contracts and keeping players before free agency that you do in baseball when you talk about the NBA. Like, the bottom line is the Bulls have to either do one or two things. They either have to go all in, and they got to be in 3 guys in the offseason, and they got to really go nuts and go after it. Or they got to sit there and do none of that, shed the contracts that they have, shed most of the players that they have, and completely blow this thing up and start it the hell over. Nonetheless, am I happy Jim Boylen is gone? I'm happy that the obvious move to make was actually done. That in and of itself is progress. That in and of itself suggests to me that the muck of suck that is Jerry Reinsdorf and his perpetual cycle of mid-market, small-market mediocrity is, at least at this point, not totally infiltrated the new Bulls front office. And I certainly hope that continues. Like I said, let's not break out the champagne just yet. This organization is in a bad way. They've got nothing. There's really no hope in any near-term future for anything really positive. There is a long way to go and a lot of work to be done here. And no, I won't be celebrating in a year or two if they're a 5th seed in the playoffs, because who gives a crap? You're either in this game for one of two things: to contend for a championship, or put yourself in a position to where long-term you can contend for a championship. That's it. Everything else in basketball is a gigantic, ginormous waste of freaking time. So I will not be celebrating if the Bulls are sliding into the playoffs next year as a 7th or 8th seed. And if it looks like that's about the height of what they could be, that's the best of what they could be, then what the hell good was it? It was counterproductive. Take this opportunity to start fresh and truly start fresh. Make it productive. And it might be painful for a bit of time, but let's be honest, Bulls fans, the past 2+ decades have been pretty damn painful most of the time. So what the heck would be another a couple of years to potentially drink from the champagne of championships once again? How bad would that be, really?